It's a pleasure for me to be here to talk a little bit about the Revenue Watch Institute and in particular Resource Governance Index. Just briefly by way of introduction, the Revenue Watch Institute is a not-for-profit policy institute that promotes good governance of oil, gas, and mineral revenues for the public good. We do this through the provision of funding, training, and technical assistance in over 30 countries. We also work to promote the development and the uptake of international norms and standards of good governance through the EITI to securities listing requirements in the US and the EU and other initiatives. This morning I want to talk a bit about one of Revenue Watch Institute's flagship products, the Resource Governance Index. I need to make a short apology. It's never good to start with an apology for the limitations of a presentation, but unfortunately the Revenue Watch Index is being launched next week. And so I'm stuck with the unenviable task of both following a very interesting presentation that provided some data, but also doing so with only teasers. I think next week, after the 15th, all of this will be available, and I would encourage you to take a look then when all of the wonderful things I'll be talking about will be available for perusing and working with, and there'll be some interesting tools. In any event, I want to talk about the index. It's a new tool that measures the quality of governance in major oil, gas, and mineral producing states. The index is based on the premise that good governance of natural resources is necessary for the successful development of countries with abundant oil, gas, and minerals. I'm going to give a short introduction to the index. I'll first look at what the index measures, how it was built, why it matters, and what its objectives are. And lastly, a short preview of the types of things that will be available when it is launched next week. So first, what does the Revenue Governance Index, or the Resource Governance Index measure? My apologies. The index evaluates the transparency and accountability of the oil, gas, and mining sectors in 58 countries. It measures the disclosure of information through official sources, and by that chiefly we are relying on government websites. It also looks at the legal setting for the extractive sector and the presence of safeguards and oversight mechanisms. The index measures as well the level of governance in state-owned companies in 45 of the 58 countries covered. It looks at natural resource funds that are present in 23 of those countries, and it looks at the subnational revenue transfer mechanisms that are in play in 30 countries. There's a list of the 58 countries covered. You'll see they're broken down between mineral and hydrocarbons. There are 40 countries where we are reporting on the hydrocarbon sector and 18 where we're looking at the mineral sector. Obviously, many of the countries on both sides of this list would produce both minerals and hydrocarbons because of often significant differences in the governance structures that surround those two sectors. We look at the sector that provides the greatest revenues within a particular country. So for instance, in Brazil, we're looking at the hydrocarbon sector, not mineral extraction. In Tanzania, it's the opposite. We're looking at minerals and not the gas sector. You'll see also that there are three countries, federal countries, where we are looking specifically at one producing region. And that's, again, because within the federal states, many of the disclosure and governance norms differ quite significantly from region to region. So at the moment, we're looking at one particular region within each of those three federal countries. For each of the 58 countries that are included in the index, our methodology was as follows. We have expert researchers that were hired to gather primary information, to answer a standard questionnaire. That questionnaire was prior to the research process, was vetted by other experts. Following the completion of the questionnaire, those were all vetted by peer researchers, peer reviewers, and then fact-checked by Revenue Watch staff. The Revenue Governance or the Resource Governance Index assesses data that was published between 2008 and 2012 and was produced, the research was conducted between January and October of 2012. So there are instances where, as you'll see when the report comes out, information may appear to be out of date. It's often because of the cutoff and changes in policy that may have come after the cutoff date for that research, generally in a positive direction. So how is the index built? As I said, it's a 173-item questionnaire, which we cluster into 45 indicators, and those are further grouped into four specific components of good governance. The first component of good governance that we're highlighting is the institutional and legal setting. This is the degree to which the laws, regulations, and institutional arrangements facilitate transparency, accountability, and open and fair competition. For example, in this category, we're looking at the existence of freedom of information laws, EITI participation, requirements for environmental and social impact assessments, the definition or a clear definition of subnational transfer rules that are contained in law, etc. The second category is reporting practices. This is where we look at the de facto disclosure of information by government agencies on extractive sector operations and payments. Key data, this would hit on key data such as production volumes, production value, reports on licensing processes, etc. The third category is covered in the index as safeguards and quality controls. Here we're looking at the presence and the quality of oversight mechanisms that encourage integrity and guard against conflict of interest in the governance of the extractive sectors. For example, conflict of interest disclosures, quality of spending reports, auditing of state-owned company reports, etc. The last category that we're covering in the index is what we're calling the enabling environment. And these are indicators, these gather indicators of the broader governance environment that's generated by using over 30 external measures of accountability. The data reflects the extent to which the broader environment will help or hinder transparency and accountability efforts in the extractive sector. Thus, if, for instance, there's widespread corruption, the argument is natural resource transparency is unlikely to have a strong impact on the ability of citizens to hold their governments accountable. On the other hand, if the enabling environment is strong, then those measures will likely have greater effect. As I said, the index structure, we produce scores within each component, and those are aggregated into indicators. This shows the 40-some indicators that are used. Each of the four components is then weighted to produce a composite score. You'll see that reporting practices is weighted more heavily than the others, given a 40% weight in the overall composite score. And this is because the de facto reporting regime and de facto practice is the best indicator of transparency and often indicates weaknesses where the laws say are quite strong, but the actual practice is weak. The other categories here are weighted equally at 20% apiece. So why does the index matter? The 58 countries covered represent over 85% of worldwide petroleum production, 90% of diamond production, and 80% of copper, as well as sizable shares of many other important minerals. Profits from these resources totaled over $2.6 trillion in 2010. 41 of these 58 countries covered are classified as resource rich by the IMF, and on average, the extractive sector in the covered countries accounts for 1/3 of GDP and 1/2 of total exports. Thus, in all these countries covered in the index, how well the natural resources are managed is vitally important to the development outcomes that we'll see. So our objective in creating this index is to really highlight this challenge of governance and to provide some tools for addressing it. I think everyone in this room knows that natural resource governance is important. It's why we're all here. We also know that it's extremely complicated. But it is a problem that can be fixed. As Dr. Hansen noted in his very interesting presentation, there is a possibility of managing these challenges well. The resource curse, as it's often called, is not predetermined. So mismanagement and corruption can have many manifestations, from the negotiation of poor terms and contracts to the weak revenue collection to poor management of savings and spending. These are all areas in the value chain where the management of natural resources can go off track, and fixing those problems can result in natural resources becoming a boon for development or providing fuel for development. So what the index offers is a wealth of detailed, country-specific comparative information that serves as both a diagnostic tool and also a guide for reform. It's going to help, our hope is that it would help policymakers and advocates focus on the right issues and to enable dialogue among the various stakeholders within countries based on an evidence-based approach. The availability of robust evidence, as Dr. Hansen noted, is extremely important. It's going to enable more policy research in this area, help us better understand why some countries exhibit better outcomes from natural resource extraction than others, help us identify the cause of some shortcomings and achievements in the management of natural resources. A further goal of the index is to raise global awareness and focus attention on the urgent deficit in governance, transparency, and accountability in the extractive sector. I want to look, without going into too much detail into the findings, which of course will be available next week, I just want to highlight a few of the recommendations and sort of general recommendations that we make coming out of the results of the index. The first is that it highlights the importance of contract disclosure. Not only the importance of contract disclosure, but the fact that contract disclosure is possible. We see that there are a number of countries disclosing contracts. This is important because publishing contracts enables citizens to evaluate benefits and protections that are negotiated by their governments. It lets them monitor whether companies and governments are living up to their obligations. The index shows that there are indeed a significant number of countries that regularly publish contracts, and additional countries that publish irregularly. It does also show, however, that that's not the norm, and so it indicates an area for progress, both within regions and countries, but also globally. It also highlights that the importance of regulatory agencies being required to publish timely, comprehensive reports on extractive operations, including detailed revenue and project information. The index shows that practices vary quite substantially, with only a handful of countries publishing timely and comprehensive information. The index tells us where the specific weaknesses are. For instance, a large number of countries disclose next to nothing around licensing practices, and this is an extremely important area for governance reform. The index also highlights the need to focus attention on transparency, accountability standards that apply to state-owned companies and natural resource funds, and looks in particular at specific practices within each of those special areas. To complete my teaser, the Resource Governance Index after the 15th will be available, and on the website we'll have an interactive tool for comparing and visualizing data on resource governance. All 58 of the questionnaires, very detailed questionnaires with links to primary sources, will be available. There will be 58 printable country pages which provide relevant economic and extractive sector statistics and analyze the data and provide context for some of the findings. Country results will be displayed by indicator with ranks comparing countries. A full database of new indicators and 58 countries will be available for research into this area, which I think is what we're really looking for and a principal benefit of this product. We'll also have a published report, 5 regional fact sheets that zero in on key issues within particular regions, as well as other tools on the website. This is just a snapshot of sort of what one of the country pages will look like, and when you use this in conjunction with the website, you'll be able to dive into those specific numbers and look at actual practices across, as I said, a huge range of indicators and questions. So with that, I will close and encourage you to turn back to Revenue Watch's website in about 6 days. Thanks very much.